we're familiar with it, of course, because our winters are long, cold, and dark, and some people have a hard time paying their bills.
I do believe we do have a quorum present now, so thank you all for being here. Today, members, we are going to be talking about school safety, and I want to sincerely thank Senator Chair Swedinski for giving me the gavel today. I didn't know there was some confusion last week about whether or not we would be ending power sharing on Monday and Thursday, and so I appreciate you allowing me to continue the work we had started with this committee, and on an issue that is so near and dear to my heart. Violence in schools and school safety is an issue I knew was incredibly prevalent and important, but it wasn't until I had a St. Paul public school teacher, a middle school teacher, come to my office just out of desperation last year and tell me that it's worse than we could ever imagine. That she has middle school students bringing weapons, knives, even nunchucks to class and joining gangs just to make sure that they're safe and protected, and that she wanted to speak out more on these issues and felt that she could not for fear of her job. And so this is something that I've been passionate about since that meeting, and I don't think that the bills before us today will have all the answers. I think the goal with them is to see what we as a body can do in regards to shedding more light on these issues and being a little more transparent. The intention is to hear originally from kind of boots on the ground about what's going on with the state of school safety in Minnesota right now. And then we'll go into 3 bills that will all be laid over. I believe when it comes to school safety, it's a nonpartisan issue, and I'm hoping that through what we hear and learn today, we can work to solve it in a bipartisan manner. So again, Chair Swedinski, I thank you for the time. With that, I believe we would want to move first to a remote testifier to talk about school safety impacts on education, and that would be Allison Gans, who I was told is online with us. Welcome to the committee, Ms. Gans. If you wouldn't mind stating your name and who you're with for the record, and then begin your testimony. And I should add, for our first 4 testifiers, we're looking at about 3 to 5 minutes apiece. So thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Allison Gans, and I'm a teacher in Hibbing. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for taking the time to hear from me today. Like I said, I'm a 2nd grade teacher in Hibbing, and I've been teaching in Hibbing for 11 years. I'm also a mother of a 1st grade student and a preschooler that go to our district. Our schools are in trouble, and I'm here to talk to you and just ask you for your help and a listening ear. I appreciate your comments at the beginning. That's really resonates really well with us here, even at the middle school, but also at the lower levels, which I think would be really surprising to some people. As a district, especially in our preschool through 3rd grade settings, we're encountering more and more verbal and physically violent students. With the current statutes, we're really limited in our ability to enforce consequences and to help all our students succeed. I'm very concerned as a teacher, a colleague, and most importantly, a parent. Our children deserve to be in schools where they feel safe and have the opportunity to learn, and our teachers deserve to be in an environment where they feel safe as well. This isn't happening right now. Daily, our staff and students are unsafe because of numerous children's repeated physically violent behaviors. Students are destroying property in the classrooms. They throw objects like pencils, books, and chairs. They destroy things in our hallways like artwork and bulletin boards. Students are often screaming or yelling, and obviously this behavior is very distracting to the other children. I've seen several students resort to putting their hands over their ears. My own son has come home saying he doesn't feel safe at school and been tearful about going to school the next day to other behaviors. It's so devastating to watch as a teacher and a parent in our school. There's several incidents where students have physically harmed our staff members, and the staff has been resulted to have to seek medical attention for injuries. With our current statutes, these students face very little consequences since they cannot be suspended and are often not removed. In addition to affecting teaching staff and other students, I'm concerned how it affects those students that are having the outburst as well. They clearly need support that can't be provided in our schools, yet we continue to subject them to humiliation of being looked at like they're the trouble kids. Their peers, and especially first graders and kindergartners, they don't understand mental health issues and they don't understand all the trauma kids are facing. They sometimes only see these kids as just being bad. All students deserve to have a school that's academic focused. Due to the number of issues in our schools, our students' learning is affected every day. Classroom teachers struggle to get through the lessons because of behaviors or have to stop it completely. Our special education staff is not able to address all the IEPs because their time and resources are being utilized to constantly put out fires. Please know that as educators, we do everything in our power to make our students feel safe and receive the learning they deserve. In Hibbing, we're a very veteran staff and we have support and are still struggling. Due to budget cuts, we've sacrificed having higher class sizes so we could try to implement 2 behavior interventionists, and it's just not enough. We put in a lot of effort and time and love to help our students that are struggling, but we're asking for support to help make active change in our schools. As educators and parents, we're asking for assistance and options for students with extreme behaviors. And educators and parents, we're asking you that you revisit the disciplinary statutes that are prohibited at our level. Thank you for your time and thoughtfulness and consideration in helping our students and our teachers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Up next, we have Sheriff Sean Derringer with the Minnesota Sheriff's Association. On deck, we will have Mark Ross after that if you want to make your way to the table. Sheriff, thank you very much. If you could please state your name and who you're with for the record.
You're okay, Madam Chair?
Either way is fine. Begin your testimony.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I am Sheriff Sean Derringer with the Wright County Sheriff's Office. As you stated, public safety is not a partisan issue. As I read through the 3 components to the bill or what's being proposed here, obviously I didn't find a public safety component to it, but I appreciate being invited to the table here. So thank you. And I will try to stay with my script, but I have some real life examples that have just taken place over the last couple of months. I would love to expand on those a little bit. So I will stay with my script. So thank you for having me. I am Wright County Sheriff Sean Derringer. I'm grateful to be here today and hope to answer any questions you may have about our successful SRO program in Wright County. The Wright County Sheriff's Office has 14 assigned SROs that are responsible for 59 buildings spanning 10 school districts across our county. As of yesterday, our SROs have handled 483 cases so far this year, and over the last 3 years have been responsible for more than 4,500 calls for service. These calls for service include fights, drug possession, drug use, overdoses, thefts, criminal damage to property, assaults against students and staff, sexual assault, and threats. Mental health, or the mental health of our student body, is certainly a contributing factor. The last couple of years have been very challenging for our SROs, as you all know. The legislation passed a couple of years ago without our input left several unanswered questions and a great deal of confusion. While many agencies understandably pulled their SROs from schools, we chose not to. This was a difficult decision, but I did not feel comfortable pulling our SROs from their schools. I know that the vast majority of their time is spent building and fostering relationships and being a positive role model within the school setting. Our SROs are truly part of the school community and serve a very important role. I am grateful that during the last legislative session, we were invited to the table. I testified in both House and Senate hearings, and by working together, we were able to make meaningful and clarifying changes to the law. As I stated, SROs working in cooperation with school staff have an important role in providing for a safe environment where our children can thrive and receive the necessary tools to write their own success stories. I want to share a couple of examples, and I will try to be brief. The first one was just in November. We were made aware of a school threat in a middle school. Two students had sent a text message to a fellow classmate. The message advised that there would be a school shooting the next day and the classmate would be the first target. We obviously responded to that. We were able to come up with the user ID and tracked the suspects to an address. When we followed up at that address, within hours, we were met by parents. It turned out that the threat was not serious, but we did find an available firearm uncased and accessible by that student. So if the means are there and this were a serious threat, we could have had potential problems. But early intervention by our SROs were able to keep the school in session. The next one, there was a Snapchat to three other students with a threat talking about shooting up the school. The threat entailed a picture of the firearm with the caption, "Don't tell anyone, I'm shooting up the school tomorrow." Through numerous investigative pieces, we were able to track the Snapchat account to a junior high student, again, middle school, junior high, who stated that that he sent the threat because he thought that was a good idea to get out of class the next day. This created a lot of problems in our community. As you know, social media is kind of the angst, and when it hits the social groups of the social media groups in our various community groups, this one caused such a stir that only 30% of the kids showed up for school the next day. We had this person in custody. It took 20 hours to get this person into custody because we had to do 2 subpoenas and a search warrant to be able to track down those identifying factors to figure out where it came from. This one I hope that you will see, this is heartfelt, and this is a perfect example of why I love having SROs in a school. A vulnerable juvenile female came as a new enrollment to the school as she was being placed in foster care within our community. The school resource officer was available with other school staff and had the ability to not only get to know this student and foster home, but also to understand the history and concerns about her. The student was brought up in a broken home with a history of physical, sexual, and drug abuse. A major concern was that this student would attempt to elope. Knowing these things, we were able to coordinate with specific staff in the school and come up with a safety plan. One day it happened. She did elope. She left everything behind, got up from her classroom, and simply left. Our SRO was notified immediately and began the process, pulling up school cameras, and she also had left her school Chrome notebook behind. Going through those things and following up on the school cameras, we saw that female get into a car, unknown car to us, across the street from the school. Within a couple of hours, we had our CID, our detectives, following up with this, and we were able, within a couple of hours, track this person down to another city. We found this female in the home of a 43-year-old male. Her conversations with this man concerned coming to live with him and producing pornographic videos with him. He was obviously arrested a short time later, but I think that highlights the importance of SROs in our schools. 2 more quick examples because I don't want to just be the doom and gloom. Our SROs, obviously that's all important and on the criminal side. But I am so proud of the men and women of our sheriff's office and our SROs. This last school year, at the beginning of the school year, one of our SROs noticed a student that came in the same shoes that he was wearing last year that didn't fit him last year. My SRO actually worked with the parents and took this kid out shopping. The kid got to pick out his new pair of shoes, and our SRO paid for those shoes. Another example was we got an alert from an elementary school about a family or several kids in the same family that did not show up to school. It was one of the first cold days of this last school year. Our SRO went to the residence, did a welfare check, found out that the mother was at work, had left the kids there because her kids did not have winter coats, gloves, and hats, and she did not feel like she was able to get them on the bus safely because of their inadequate winter clothing. He stayed at this house for several hours until the mother was able to get back home because he did not feel comfortable leaving these kids home. Made them dinner in their own kitchen. After the mom came home, he obviously worked with her, got her connected with social services, and there was a child protection worker that came out and met with them. Unbeknownst to anyone, my SRO then went to the store, got coats, hats, all of her children, and returned later that night. And they were at school the next day. Those are the kind of things that our SROs are doing every single day in our school districts. Couldn't be more proud of them. Again, thank you so much for having me and allowing us to share some of the positive things that our SROs are doing.
Thank you. I think we have one question here quick from Senator
Please, thank
McQuaid.
you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How many SROs in our schools are sheriffs?
In Wright County,
The state?
I don't have a number for that,
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Is it more than just Wright County?
certainly.
It is?
Yes.
Do you happen to know, I mean, maybe not the specific number, but like how many districts? Like I'm in Rosemont, Eganapa Valley. I think we have local police, but is it more common in some exurban, greater Minnesota districts?
So in Wright County, we find ourselves very unique. I contract services for 13 of our 16 cities. Only 3 cities have their own police departments. All 3 of those cities have their own SROs. So the school districts under our purview through those city contracts contract with the sheriff's office for SRO coverage. So I think we're unique, but we're not unique to SROs across the state.
And I, just speaking for Carver County, I think our sheriff's department contracts with a few of the schools too. Yep, absolutely.
There were new Department of Justice guidelines put out in December, I want to say, or maybe November, for SRO trainings as a response to a long investigative series that found rampant abuse by children. And we had a bill, Senator Mann, last year for an SRO that had been sexually assaulting a child in school. Does the Minnesota SRO program abide by those new guidelines, do you know?
Yes, all of our training has been incorporating all of the changes that we've seen certainly over the last 2 years, but more specifically, the new guidance coming with the bill last year gave pretty clear guidance as to what it's going to look like. And I can speak for us. We were already ahead of the game because, to be honest, the bill as it was passed this last year was best practices that we were already employing.
Madam Chair. Yep. I don't recall this in the bill last year, but does it discuss specifically standards to prevent sexual misconduct? Because I think that, to me, I don't remember that. That might have been in rules and like rulemaking, but I don't remember it being in the bill. Is that part of?
I don't think
The
that's
standards.
specific to the bill that was
Okay.
passed last year.
Madam Chair, if I could ask one more question?
Yep, one more
And this is
time.
my last one. I have an email out to you, and or to your organization, and so I'm going to ask it since I have you here. Are SROs working with ICE? Because I've had some students and their families reach out worried about sending their kids to school if the parents or the students are undocumented, and I just wanted to know if there's like an exception of law enforcement working with ICE in that circumstance, if they're already in the schools and have relationships with the students and parents.
I am not aware of anyone working with ICE in the schools.
Is that I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
It could be policy driven by each independent. I don't want to speak holistically across the state. I can tell you the 14 SROs, we have not had any ICE show up in Wright County to our schools.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your testimony and for your service to our communities.
Thank you so much.
Up next, we have Mark Ross, and on deck, if you'd like to come down as well, Rodolfo Perez. Welcome, Mr. Ross, to the committee. If you could please state your name and who you're with for the record. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Ross, M-A-R-K-R-O-S-S. I am the president of the St. Paul Police Federation. I am on the board of directors for the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association, and I'm a St. Paul kid who was an SRO at the school I graduated from. So one of the highlights of my career. I'm going to keep this very general. I don't have anything written. I have a few notes that I'd just like to speak to. I'd like to keep this a little more conversational, and I'm certainly open to questions if you should have any specific questions. I think from a parental standpoint, I think that we owe our parents and our students transparency and accountability. And I think this applies to school districts, and not just in the Twin Cities, but everywhere. And I can speak to accountability directly because I'm a police officer and I wear a body camera. About 20% of the time now when I don the uniform, I'm usually dressed like this. But we are at the tip of the spear as it relates to accountability, and we welcome that. We think it's very important. In fact, I wish more people in public professions wore body cameras for accountability reasons. I think we might all be a little better off. But that's my personal opinion. But here's what happens. I'm going to speak from my experience in the St. Paul Public Schools. There was a system in St. Paul back when I was an SRO, and it was referred to as an administrative transfer. And what that did was it was basically a game of musical chairs, and these were students that just could not function in any given building, and they were transferred to another building. Generally, it was for fighting, gang activity, maybe drug dealing. It depends. It ran the gamut of issues. But what happened is, as an SRO at Coleman during the time I was there were some pretty significant gang problems going on. And we'd get to the point where we could finally get some of these kids removed from our school. But what that meant was we were going to get a couple kids from another school because that's just how the game was played. So we'd finally get to a point where things were calm, fighting had stopped, gang activity had toned down a little bit, and then the hammer would drop and we'd see, oh, we're going to get a couple kids from Johnson are going to come over now, and then we're going to send our kids there. And it was just a revolving door of kids. And so I think from a policy perspective, it's important for school districts to be accountable to communities and kids and somewhere to keep a repository of these things so you know, as a parent, when you're enrolling your student at a school, what kinds of things are going on there. I'm not saying you have to throw the kid's name out on Front Street, but I do think it's important. And you need to look no further than the St. Paul Public School District and the declining enrollment. You look at test scores, I mean, it has just fallen off a cliff, and I feel terribly about it. Being a third generation St. Paul Public School graduate, and I sent my own kids to those schools through middle school until I felt it was too dangerous and had to move them. And again, that's my experience. Ms. Jans, our first speaker, talked about consequences, which I think is really important. Consequences guide everything. All of us do, quite frankly. I would say, all of you have been elected to office, and there are consequences for every decision you make and don't make. And you know how that impacts your ability to get elected or potentially reelected. That doesn't change. We need to hold kids accountable. There needs to be a standard, and you have to meet the standard, and that's it. We need safe learning environments. And I can speak, there were kids that came to Como from third world countries, and I think they probably felt more scared in the hallways at our school than maybe they did in some of the places they came from in refugee camps. I mean, that's a true story. And I spent a lot of time working with those kids in those classrooms to build trust with American police officers and show them that we are there to help those folks. So I think consequences are important. And as it relates to that, 2 years ago, there was a kid in a public high school in St. Paul who was stabbed to death. His name's Devin Scott. And you're going to hear a lot of people talk about all kinds of incidents that they're familiar with and how police interact with kids in schools, but I doubt most of the people that are most critical of the work that we do even know his name. And that's troubling. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Members, any questions? Senator Swedzinski.
Thank you. So, what is causing this increase in, when were you first an SRO?
From 2010 to 2014.
Okay, so we are hearing that, mental ill, all the things that you've alluded to in your testimony and the other previous two testifiers, and I've been begging to ask, what do you see if you had magic dust and you could do one thing to make kids behave better and to treat each other with more respect and admiration for their fellow members of their species, what would you have us do? And you did mention consequences a few times.
Sure.
But consequences, like, what's an example? I mean, we're all grabbing at straws right now and we want to help you. I was a classroom teacher for over 30 years, and so, what I saw in my first year versus my latter years is night and day, but now we're looking at the experts today, excuse me, to try to help us figure out, to get us through this, to help the kids and the parents and everybody involved in this. And so anyways, I don't know what you're going to say, but thanks for being here today to help navigate us through this.
Mr. Ross.
Well, that's $1 million question. I'm not a genius by any stretch of the imagination, but I do, here's what I think. Generally speaking, it's about 5% of the student population that creates 90% of the problems in the schools. So if we can figure out how to deal with those 5%, and a lot of those kids just aren't going to be successful in a school setting, no matter what you do. There's all kinds of societal reasons for that. Occasionally there's just a bad seed. It just happens. There are bad people out there. Some are just born that way. Some kids are products of their environment. It just depends on the circumstance. But if we could figure out what to do with this 5% that create problems for the rest of the building, that is the answer. Now, what kind of an academic setting that is, I'm not certain. Because are kids entitled to an education? I do believe that. Now, what setting that's in, we could have a robust conversation about that. But we're really talking about 5% of any given school's population. I could tell you at Como High School when I was there was about 1,200 students. And if you could have said, hey, take the 100 kids in here that just disrupt everything and turn the place upside down and find something for them, the place would have been run beautifully every single day. So really, it's a small portion of students. How we deal with them, boy, that is if anybody here can figure that out, God bless you. But we could do it. I mean, we have to start to try. And we do that collectively, and I do believe that's nonpartisan. I hope that answered your question, but I'm sorry.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And did you say you stopped being an SRO in St. Paul Public Schools in 2020?
2014.
2014.
Correct.
I wanted to take a look because, you know, I graduated from high school in 2004, so I haven't been in a high school for a full day since then. And it looks like in St. Paul Public Schools, the rates of behavior issues, problems are going down. They've instituted the positive behavioral interventions and support systems that's training educators on preventing problem behavior, reinforcing positive behavior. Students are reporting that they feel safer at school, and teachers say that they feel like it's a really good intervention. So are you seeing evidence of PBIS? Are you going into the schools right now? Are you seeing that working right now in St. Paul Public Schools?
I can tell you firsthand, and I'm glad Senator Coleman mentioned this on the front end of opening this meeting about someone she spoke to in St. Paul Public Schools. They're basically directed not to report things to the police. So I don't know what they're reporting, and I don't know how they're reporting it. That's why I feel there has to be some kind of obligation to report certain things, because I don't think those numbers you rattle off, I don't think those are accurate. I have to be quite honest with you. I think those numbers don't reflect what's truly happening in those buildings. And that's based on people I talk to in the community. We're not being called as frequently as you should. I can assure you of that. And I think that maybe some other testifiers will speak to instances where they've basically walked into a school to deal with a matter that should be a police matter, and they've been met by obstructionists in that regard.
Senator McQuaid.
So just for clarity, you're not getting called as much. The schools report that it's going well, but anecdotally you feel like it's going worse, and so you want the police to be called more on the students in school.
Mr. Ross.
I didn't say I want the police. I didn't say that. I didn't say I want the police to be called more. What I'm saying is we're not being as called as often as we probably should be. All right, anecdotal. It's not anecdotal that enrollment is rapidly declining in St. Paul. That's not anecdotal. That's factual. We no longer have SROs in schools. That's also factual. So I can't tell you how often SROs should be called, how frequently they are called. I don't know those statistics, but I can come up with all kinds of statistics, and I can shape them in a way that make them look any way I want to. I don't believe that's the case, Miss
Senator, yeah, Senator.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Ross, for your testimony. Members, I am going to politely request that when we ask boots on the ground to come and tell us their experiences, we do not use that as an opportunity to tell them they're wrong, to grill them with tough questions, and that we humbly listen. That is what I'm going to request. We do have one more testifier, Mr. Rodolfo Perez. Thank you, Mr. Ross, for your time.
Thank you, Miss. May I add one thing?
Yes.
I am easily accessible to anybody on this committee, and I'll take any grilling that anybody wants to give me. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Perez, welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and who you're with, and begin your testimony. Thanks for making the drive in.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. My name is, Madam Chair, my name is Rudy Perez. I am the National Association of School Resource Officers. I am the past president of this organization, and I represent thousands and thousands of school resource officers from across the country. I also, I did 23 years in Los Angeles, where I got to work with the LAUSD, where we protected 500,000 students, 1,500 locations, and it was a big operation with close to 500 SROs. So I've been living in this world of education and having the ability to maintain, to mentor, lead, and protect students safely through graduation for a long time now. A little introduction, I get to be the Assistant Chief of Police with Golden Valley, and it's such a pleasure to be here. You guys have quite interesting weather here. I'm still trying to get used to it. Just walking across, my face froze, and I was saying, I gotta get to the table, because if you're not at the table, my dad said, you're gonna be on the menu. So we can't be on the menu any longer. Well, thank you so much for allowing me to be here. And you guys are phenomenal. You guys are policymakers. Today is about one thing, making sure kids get educated. And that is my goal. Even the 5%, even the 10% that are causing sometimes havoc have to have an education. And we believe that in law enforcement, that we mentor, lead, and protect. The role of a school resource officer is to have a school resource officer, as the sheriff said, it's very important to properly train, properly select, and properly equip our law enforcement officers to be in the ecosystem of an education world. I believe that a properly trained officer can be such a tool for you, such a tool for your kids to graduate safely. I always say, kids that don't feel safe will not graduate or will not learn. My heart goes out to the teacher that we heard today. That is very difficult when you hear a teacher speak of the challenges that she is going through. If she doesn't have the ability to teach, those children are not going to learn, and we owe it to our children. We owe it to raise the next generation of mature kids to engage in whether it's a trade, whether it's education, or whether they move into your seats. It's very important to do that. I'm also going to speak on two trends that I'm really learning, or three trends. First trends that we're seeing nationwide is a lot of weapons are being brought to school. Whether it's to protect themselves, whether it's to fight against other people, whether it's to deal with gang issues that are in the area, those are trends. When the trend was to remove police officers from campuses across the nation, this is what happened. No cops, no consequences. And it's very hard, sir, to talk about what is the right consequence, right? Because I still believe every child needs an education, and we need a police with empathy. And it's my desire to make sure we do that and walk through those lines. The other issues we are having is narcotics. Once you remove the issue, narcotics, and fentanyl is still a huge epidemic in our country. It is very sad to see the overdoses we are seeing across the country of fentanyl issue affecting our schools. And once again, that goes back to when you remove police officers, when you announce nationwide, when you make it known our cops were demonized for many, many years, you're gonna have a chilling effect in that ecosystem. That ecosystem is an ecosystem that consists of administrators, teachers, counselors, mental health workers, but guess what? You also need a police officer. The police officer is part of that ecosystem, and it's very important to understand that. Social media is one beast we all can't control. And it's very important that we teach our kids digital citizenship. There's a lot of threats that are going on across the country. I can honestly tell you, I was a detective for 9 years with the Threat Assessment Unit. There was a lot of serious issues that we intervened. We intervened school active shooters, we recovered guns, and that is a big issue. So I think early prevention, early intervention systems can be established when you have the right ecosystem and your school resource officers at the table. So thank you very much. I'm willing to take any questions now.
Senator Swedzinski?
Thank you. Again, I gotta add, I mean, I know, but, you know, when you were talking about guns and narcotics and social media, I had an image in my head of me trying to read a comic book behind the textbook when I was a kid. Yeah. And, you know, that was like the biggest offense in my grade school in a small town in Wisconsin. And now we're dealing with guns and narcotics and social media. Yeah. Magic, I mean, do you have, you're the second testifier now to mention consequences, but what do you think should happen to a child that brings narcotics into our schools, or just give us some kind of a guidance and help so that we can help you guys do your job and all of us. And I just don't, and I don't mean to put you guys on the spot, but we need your wisdom and experience and knowledge on this to help get this right. So thanks for your testimony.
Mr. Perez.
Well, sir, I thank you for the question, and I will give you some answers. My colleagues behind me that did a phenomenal job speaking to it is very important. I'll tell you on your policymakers in one way. Police activity leagues, police mentorship programs with our youth, and even with our troubled youth, can be a phenomenal gateway to successful career. So it would be amazing to see this legislation body support police activity leagues where we can have young kids come to our police agencies, to our sheriff agencies, and we create a robust programs that can create a career pipelines to them, whether it's in policing or whether it's in something else. But I think it's very important to create mentorship programs. I'm a big advocate of mentorship programs. I'll tell you why, because I was that kid of 5%. I was the kid that was transferred from school to school. I was that kid that got in trouble consistently. I was a kid with an IEP and a 504 plan. I was the kid that was always in trouble. I had good parents, and I didn't even want to go home. Just take me to the police station. I prefer that because I knew when I get home, I had parents that held me. But we need two things, sir. So we need mentorship programs within the police departments and educational programs that our police agencies can help our parents. A lot of parents are needing guidance now, needing additional programs. I'm part of that ecosystem, and I'm willing to work with other mental health workers, other people in my ecosystem. But mentorship programs, I believe police activity league programs are phenomenal to change an ecosystem in your community.
Senator Wiesenberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to make a comment, and I wrote down all the things you basically just said. So I was just going to say thank you for what you're doing. And I wrote down what you said is you have an opportunity to get to these kids who have had a rough upbringing, and you're someone that can care about them and help with what's going on. And if they don't have that support, you can be that support. And that's what we need to do, and that's what you're doing. And I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Members, thank you so much for your testimony.
My pleasure.
Up next, we have Senator Limmer with Senate File 557. And Senator Limmer, and to all the bill testifiers, we are running a little bit behind schedule, so we'll try to keep it to 3 minutes for testimony. Senator Limmer, welcome to the
Madam Chair.
committee. Oh, go ahead, sir.
I'm sorry, just before we move on. So I really appreciated our testifiers and doing the work that they do, and I appreciated that discussion about the SROs trying to improve, trying to make healthy and safe environments for children and being there to help them. I just want to point out, and as you already know, that kids of color do not have that same feeling because of the actions of SROs in other schools, in many schools. So I hope that you keep that in mind, that you keep working on that relationship, because that relationship has been very broken in the past, and we have a long way to do to fix it. And then I completely agree with you, Madam Chair, that we are absolutely here to listen. However, when we have testifiers saying that our administrators and our teachers aren't doing their jobs because they're not properly documenting things, or they're lying about documentation. And when we hear things like kids are born bad from people without any medical or neurobiological training, it's just they're just kind of egregious statements that, while we are listening, we can't sit back and just let slide, right? It is literally our job to ask tough questions and to get to the bottom of things so that we can write policy based on data and based on facts and not based on feelings. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Senator Mann. However, as the lead of this committee, I have never brought a position forward that we are going to grill the testifiers, that we are going to make them regret showing up to this committee. And having been married to an attorney for several years, I can tell you there's a difference between genuine curiosity in a question and then asking a pointed question of when did you stop beating your wife? And so that is what I was asking that we stop doing, is that we have very genuine curiosity and we aren't trying to attack our testifiers, because that is something as lead I have never stood for with my members. So thank you for your opinion. Senator Limmer, to your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having heard that, I'm glad I'm the next presenter. Senate File 557 seeks to improve the anti-discrimination, harassment, and violence prevention methods found in our existing education statutes. Section 1 of the bill removes a loophole in the current anti-bullying law that allows school officials to know, really, or to react more to the life of a child than a parent might. And I'll explain that. This bill would simply direct the local school anti-bullying policies to specify a component to require a notice to parents rather than simply rely on the discretion of a school administrator. Nonpartisan counsel has told me that there is a provision of Chapter 13, our data privacy section in law, would not be affected by this change. Now, that's the only Section 1 is changing that notice to parents rather than rely on the sole discretion of an administrator. Section 2 creates a new provision within the anti-bullying law that recognizes the affirmative duty of the public school to notify the parent when certain events take place. These events would be when the student was the target of violence or harassment or bullying, or the student themselves are engaged in violence to others in the course of a school event, or when a school employee has used reasonable force against the student. It's rather a simple bill, and I'll stand for any questions, but before I do, I'd like to invite our testifiers up, and why don't you announce who we have, and they can come forward with their testimony.
Great, thank you, Senator Limmer. We have up first Mr. Kendall Qualls, if you'd like to make your way down, followed by Christine, I apologize if I say this wrong, Truine. And then just for members keeping track on the agenda, Mr. Driver and Aronson would like to speak at the end regarding all three bills. We'll have them come up later. So Mr. Qualls, welcome to the committee. If you could state your name and who you're with for the record and begin your testimony.
Hello, my name is Kendall Qualls. I'm a private citizen. I live in Medina, Minnesota. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Senator Limmer, for inviting me. You know, I believe that the fact that I'm here advocating for the rights and for the hope of parents, that if their kids have been sexually assaulted, physically assaulted, if there's been a physical incident, that they're notified, and it's not at the discretion of the administrator, it tells you how far out of the mainstream we are. It really does. In fact, if any of these incidences would occur outside of the school environment, in any other environment, in the workplace, they would be considered a crime, and civil and legal action would have been taken against the offender, not worried about the discretion of a boss saying something or anyone else. And what makes this even more so concerning in that this is not a work environment, this is not a situation outside the school. These are minors, underage kids that have experienced these incidences, and these are not anecdotal incidences, these are real people, real incidences, real parents, where these things have happened and they were not notified at the time they occurred. And if the administrators are not going to be the adults in the room, then obviously the legislatures need to be. And so as I wrap this up, I just want to say that for those of you that are considering actually opposing this bill, just know that you're opposing and you're aligning against parents of Minnesota. Okay? You're aligning with them. And when you do that, I've testified, this is my third time coming to an education committee and laying out facts and data and all that. It seems like the votes don't matter, because at the end of the day, it's an ideology vote, not what's best interest of the citizens of the state vote. And if these votes align and oppose this bill and align against parents, I can just say this publicly and outright, that you will be in the minority. You will not be the majority body coming in the next decade, and God willing, even more, because you're aligning against the will of this parents of just common sense policies. They want to be notified when their kids have been accosted or violated, and they haven't been in the past 5 to 7 years in their school system. Thank you. Senator Limmer, thank you for inviting me. Chair, thank you. Again, my name is Kendall Qualls, signing out for now.
Thank you. Welcome to the committee. I apologize. I probably botched your last name.
That's
so if you
okay.
could please
It's
state your
Troyan.
name.
Like, I'm trying to do this for the first time.
I wasn't even close.
Kendall's been here 3 times. I'm a rookie.
You can state your name, begin your testimony. Thank you.
So my name is Christine Troyan. I'm the parent of 3 elementary-aged children and also the founder and executive director of Minnesota Parents Alliance. We're a homegrown grassroots organization that exists to support parents in playing a more active role in their students' education and their school community. Minnesota Parents Alliance is focused on a bottom-up approach to improving education, and that starts in local communities. But in working with parents statewide and hearing their experiences over the last 3 years, it has become clear that there are certainly ways that the legislature can help, and adopting simple requirements that are outlined in 557 is certainly one of them. 557 is a bill that actually most Minnesotans, perhaps even some members of this committee, would be surprised to learn that there's even a need for. It requires obvious common sense procedure for adults who are charged with the safety and education of children. I think we would all like to believe that leaving incident reporting and communication decisions to administrators' discretion and a presumption that it happens in a timely and consistent fashion is sufficient, but I'm here to tell you that unfortunately it is not. I'm sure that many of you yourself are parents, and I would invite you to consider all the times that you have maybe asked your children, how was school today? And you get a fine, or what happened at school today? And you get a nothing. And then imagine your surprise when you discover that even days or weeks or months later, your child was the victim or the perpetrator of an incident at school, and no one, including your child, told you about it. You'll immediately think of all the ways that you could have better supported, guided, or advocated for your child, regardless of what their role in that incident was, if only you would have known. And your trust probably that the same lack of communication that resulted won't happen again is going to be very shaken. And particularly if you confirm that later on that you discover that that withholding of information was willful. I wish I could tell you that I've only heard of this happening once, but as somebody who spent the last 3 years hearing stories of parents statewide, I'm here to tell you that this has become an alarmingly common occurrence. I want to clarify that most of my interactions have been with exclusively like biological or adoptive parents of public school students, but the need for consistent reporting and communication is equally vital in situations involving legal guardianship or other caregivers. Before coming to speak to you today, I invited several parents with the personal experience on this topic to come alongside of me or instead of me, and the responses were all the same. They want change, but they worry about putting their child and their family in the spotlight for an incident that they wish never happened, and they just want to move on from. And that ranges from minor physical altercations to sexual assault. Some go on to say that they don't have any realistic options to enroll elsewhere, and they just want to keep a low profile and get their kids through school. And I think we can all agree that there's a severe brokenness within any system where parents have reservations about putting sunlight on the safety concerns that involve their own children. I never found the concept of compulsory education cruel until I met families who feel like they don't have a realistic choice but to send their kids into an environment that they know violent incidents are occurring regularly, and they don't have the confidence that if their child is involved that they will even know. No parent should feel that combination of fear and guilt and anxiety when they put their kids on the bus every morning. So this week, one parent shared with me that his autistic child was suspended for a nonviolent incident, and they were only made aware of that when the child logged into their Chromebook over the weekend from home, and it showed that they were not to report to school for 10 days. Imagine their confusion and the level of trust that they have in their child's school going forward. I don't think it's a secret that there's been an erosion of trust in our public education system. Declining test scores and culture wars are one thing, but the lack of transparency and communication is also a primary driver of the unsustainable unenrollment in districts across the state. I'm here to testify that the minute that a parent's trust is shaken in public schools, they will immediately start considering their options to get their kids out, or at least many of them who can do, and I know because I'm one of them. Members, school staff are responsible for minor students' more waking hours of the day than their parents or legal guardians. So gaining and maintaining that trust through transparency and communication is unquestionably a key element in Minnesota public schools to deliver on the promise of public education. You'll be hard-pressed to find anyone, I think, who disagrees that every parent who entrusts their child to the schools should, at a minimum, receive prompt communication regarding the safety and conduct and performance of their children. Every incident, every child, every time. I'm going to skip forward because I know you guys are pressed for time, but our schools are also filled with teachers, and I think we heard one of them this morning, who are begging for parent partnership. but how can parents really be a team with educators and come alongside their child and address behavior and advocate for them when they're being kept in the dark? We have student mental health issues, and I have a whole thing on that, but I want to just state that I think 557 is a simple bill, and it's well aligned with the statutory mission of Minnesota Public Schools, which I believe should be the North Star for this committee and everyone else who makes decisions on K-12 policy. The heart of that bill is parent partnership, and the heart of the mission statement for our public schools is that our public schools shall serve the needs of students by cooperating with students, parents, or legal guardians. So this bill, I think, is a great opportunity to recommit to that guiding principle of partnership with parents and guardians of our in our public schools, and I think that our public schools should be focused on the thorough, prompt, consistent, and complete communication and transparency. So at a time like this, when I know that there's partisan divide here in this body, this bill is just such a much needed path, I think, to common ground for the good of our students, our schools, and our state. So I just really want to thank all of you guys for being here today to listen and serve.
Thank you for your testimony. A reminder, members, all bills are being laid over today. Any questions? Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Limmer, I don't think when I read over your bill last night, I didn't have an immediate reaction, positive or negative, but a memory popped into my mind from high school. I had a friend, she was white, and her parents did not like black people. We were not friends publicly, I was not allowed to go to her house, and she dated a black guy in high school. And there were other people in our high school who teased her pretty relentlessly for this. Under your bill, would the school have to notify her parents that she was being harassed for what it was for? I mean, she would have gotten in a lot of trouble if her parents had found out she was dating a black guy, right? And the thing that's coming into my mind is that kids often tease or harass each other about things that are personal about them. And I'm just wondering, is it just notifying the parents that it happened? And then what happens if a parent kicks their kid out of the home, or, that's just the question that came into my mind.
Madam Chair, thank you, Senator McQuaid. There is an exception. There's an exception, and as you can see in the bill, I believe it's on page 2 at the top of the page, as well as in other places. There's a reference to section 13.02 in line 1, and it makes reference subdivision 8. That there's an exception in our data privacy law that we are not changing in this bill. What it recognizes is the exception that if a student does not want information to be shared to a parent, then the school district cannot inform the parent of what they may have experienced.
Senator McQuaid.
So there would be protection for the young lady who you made reference to.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And you know this more than I do. Is what I'm talking about considered data or versus information, or maybe it's not distinguishable in law?
Senator Limmer.
I believe I probably use the word data because it's in the chapter 13 in the entitlement of it. But information, why don't I just read it? And I'll paraphrase as I'm reading, but it's right out of subdivision 8 of chapter 13. The responsible authority, meaning the school authority, shall withhold data from parents or guardians upon request by the minor if the responsible authority determines that withholding the data would be in the best interest of the minor. If the minor student has a concern that that information would be damaging to the relationship at home, then we are leaving it in the hands of the school authority to make that decision. And that's current law.
Thank you.
Any other questions, members? Senator Abler.
I have a question and a comment, for a couple questions. Senator Limmer, can you, I don't see in the bill it talks about what prohibited conduct is. Looks like you create a new section with some things that are common sense to me. But what's the current law on what's prohibited? Is that spelled out somewhere? It's first mentioned on line 110. Receiving reports of prohibited contact. So,
Madam Chair, if I could direct you to page 3, starting on lines 10 through 18, there is a reference to prohibited conduct. And as we go down the list, it's under the notification on lines 12 of page 3. Must notify the parent or guardian of a student within 24 hours of receiving a report, and on line 14.
No, just, I'll save you some time, Senator Limmer, Madam Chair. What's the current law? Are these current, you just restated them, or is there a current definition of prohibited conduct in current law? That's all I'm after.
Senator Abler, I'm being told, yes, it's the bullying definition.
Oh, okay. Thanks. That's all I wanted. Thank you.
For your reading enjoyment, Senator, you could go to line 314 through 318, and you'll get exactly what we're looking for.
Right. Well, no, I support what you're going for. I was just curious what we've gone for in the past. So it seems, so you have two parts of your bill, and I think both of them make sense. I think the first part makes all the sense in the world, that if something happens at school, they should not decide if they want to tell the parents, but that they should. And I think the testimony of Ms. Troyan is, if I said her name right, is really valuable. And then broadening that definition to more things that I think we all think that we'd want to know about. I don't know of one thing on that list that I wouldn't want to know about that my child was subjected to. Our baby is 26, so we're kind of beyond this point. But at the time, I would want to know that. And so I hope this can go forward. I really support what you're trying to do. The comment part, so Madam Chair, we founded a charter school in 1994 when we had kids that were of age. And it was packed, and the first, the title was Parents Allied with Teachers. And I can tell you that even then, that's 30 years ago, time goes, it was really hard to get those to mix. It was oil and water. And the way you get that kind of dressing to mix is you keep shaking it in a polite way. And so it took some time for them to begin to trust each other. And as we moved on, a great deal of trust developed because both sides were already trustworthy. And I think what we've seen in the public system in particular, my kids all graduated from a public school and did well. It was a great idea. But there's an erosion of that trust. And part of it is on the part of trusting the parents to actually be meaningful and engaged. And we've seen people leaving the system to the detriment of the system and maybe even some of the opportunities that those kids might have had. So I think this is a problem. And I think it's unfair to have a parent blindly trust an administrator who might decide they just don't want to tell that parent about what happened at school. And maybe there's a few instances like Senator May Quaid offered, but there are far more where bullying under current law or the increased list now could really harm a child. And the administrator will say, well, I don't want to get that teacher in trouble because they didn't tell me or the child or whatever for whatever reasons. So I'm interested to hear what the principals think. I hope they say, yeah, we can do this. So thank you, Madam Chair. I think you're on the right track, and I think a child needs to feel safe at school, or they're not going to go. We talked about absenteeism, Senator Swedzinski, and how are we going to get them? Well, if they're afraid to go, they're not going to go. They'll pretend to go. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, and just to reiterate, I think we're going to hear from the principals about all three bills at the end. I didn't want to make them have to play musical chairs all committee hearings. So, Senator Swedzinski.
Thanks for making that reference that the child can ask an administrator or principal for to not reach out to my parents. I think I didn't know that clause existed in statute, so that's good information for me. I'm just curious, and I get it. I totally get parents' right to know versus how busy administrators and principals' lives are, and so many of them are dealing with emails still at 11:30 at night from the previous day. And is the 24 hours in stone for you, or would you, at some point in the process, could we live with something I don't know, I'm just trying to think about from an administrative point of view, if 24 hours is reasonable, or if it's just too much, or if it's too little time. And then when, must notify, are you cool with just, I'm just sending an email, this incident occurred, and that's notification?
Senator Limmer.
Sorry, I'm hitting you with a few, I'm just curious.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator. 24 hours is probably something that we could negotiate. I don't think 24 hours is a hard line in the concept here. The important thing is making sure that a parent would know that something happened at school. And some kids are rather embarrassed to bring it up, or they don't want their parents to know for a variety of reasons, and we may never really know what all those reasons could be. Let me give you one example. In one of my school districts that I represent, I have 7 school districts in my district. A young girl or a young woman in middle school was pressed against a school wall inside the building and fondled by 3 young boys. This happened repeatedly. It was in March of the year, and she was so embarrassed about it that she never told her parents. She went home. Eventually, the next year came around. Oh, and this had happened more than once in that school year, starting in March. In the next school year, she returned to the school. The young boys also returned to the school. Never once had they ever been approached by the school officials or confronted. They did it again to the young lady. And out of fear that it would happen again or get worse, she told her parents. Her parents went back to the school officials and said, why were we not informed of this last year? The school official said, since it was so close to the end of the school year, we didn't think it would happen again. Now that was in March. School years end around the first week in June. And there never was any consequence for the young men. There was total embarrassment by the young lady who had to suffer that indignity again and again, and then the next year. That's why this bill is primarily the reason why it's in front of you now. Parents need to know what's happening about their kids. If an example with Senator Mayquade's example, that there's a situation where there's either a discomfort or perhaps even a danger of a student going to or having that information being revealed to a parent, there's a provision in law right now that would prevent that. I think this is a reasonable request. You know, we tell parents the best students are the ones who go home, work with parents. Parents are involved in their education. And those students are the ones that rise the best. It's a partnership. Out of the big social fabric, it's a partnership. And I'm just asking to have that partnership recognized when a kid is either the target of violence or harassment or bullying in a school.
Senator Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Limmer, I definitely like the idea where this bill is going. Just a quick question. On lines 317 and 3.18, we talk about teacher, principal, employee, bus driver, other agent of the district or school that used reasonable force against the student. SROs are none of these things. Is there a reason why if an SRO uses force against the student, we left that out?
I would see that as a friendly amendment. I think we just omitted it because we weren't thinking about it.
Thank you.
Senator Limmer, any closing remarks?
No, I think I've said enough.
Okay. Madam Chair,
Senator Mann.
I'd like to offer an oral amendment.
To the amendment.
Lines .17, after bus driver, add SRO.
So members, one thing I would caution with the amendment is we spent a lot of time last year trying to separate SROs from provisions of statute like this, and that's kind of where we got into hot water. So I would feel uncomfortable voting in favor of this amendment without consulting them first. But Senator Limmer, to the amendment.
Madam Chair, you reminded me just now of all of the big discussion we had on SROs. I would not want this to unravel and, in the pursuit of perfection, get rid of the good. We are not voting on this. I'd like to work with Senator Mann on this issue. And in the event that this is considered for inclusion in the bill or to stand separately, I think it would be best to have a little consultation and also get the advice of the SRO people as well. And Senator Mann, I commend you for bringing this up, but why don't we talk to the folks that are involved in it in between the time that it's considered for ultimate passage?
Madam Chair,
Senator Mann.
I think that's fine. Thank you.
So Senator Mann withdraws her amendment, oral amendment. Senator Limmer, Senate File 557 is laid over for possible inclusion, and I look forward to hearing what comes from the two of you working together on that. Senator Duckworth, I was informed by Senator Swedinski that he is really enjoying the vacation time right now, so he's going to have you take the gavel while I take my bill. If you want to head over here.
Keep this as short as possible, huh? Well, now I know what the four-string quarterback on the Vikings feels like. Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the committee that you're chairing. Please feel free to present your bill.
Thank you, and members, as a daughter of a Ramsey County sergeant, I am just really a stickler for time, so I'm going to cut some pieces out of my testimony to try to keep everyone moving. Military time, I should add, which was always frustrating growing up. And so to be as brief as possible, Senate File 676 was in fact inspired by the St. Paul middle school teacher that came to my office and said, I would love to testify in front of your committee. I would love to work with you publicly on a bill. I would love to talk to the local papers about what's going on in my school. But it's been made crystal clear to me that my job will be in jeopardy if I do that. So first, kind of in the theme of sunlight on some of these issues, Section 1 of Senate File 676 is intended to make sure that knowledge about episodes of school violence and threats is widely shared with school teachers and school parents in a timely manner. Notices must not compromise privacy rights of students, but a notice must provide information on violent activity, including injuries or instances when a dangerous weapon is brandished or confiscated at school events or on school grounds. And the notice must convey whether the school is aware of videos or recordings of violent injuries. I don't want to find out that my child got beat by seeing a video of it go viral on TikTok. I would like to know that first and foremost. Being transparent about the evidence available is important to resolve the case justly and in a manner that reassures the family and community. The second part of Senate File 676 is clear that the notice is as simple as delivering an email or text message to parents who have already consented to receive such messages. If this communication option is not available to the school can choose another method or none. Section 2 of 676 is a common sense protection for teachers and other school employees who report or communicate incidents of school violence or dangerous conduct. Employees must not face retaliation for participating in an investigation, hearing, or inquiry regarding school and classroom safety. The bill is also clear that employees must continue to uphold legal protections of student data privacy rights. Last year, this employee protection provision of the legislation passed the Senate with a consensus 66-0 vote on April 2nd, but was unfortunately dropped during conference committee. Mr. Chair, I do have a testifier, and then again, Mr. Driver and Aronson will testify at the end of Senator Coran's bill.
Well, very good. Thank you. Feel free to introduce yourself and go ahead and begin.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for having me. My name is Becca Thompson. I am a teacher. I've been a teacher for 25 years and more, and I also am a member of the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, representing North Minneapolis. So I prepared something because I'm like a teacher, I have a tendency to ramble. And like a teacher, I also took a lot of notes of the previous speakers of things that were resonating with me, but I'll stick to my comments. School today is a deeply complicated institution that few fully understand. Parents see their children's experiences, teachers remain isolated in their classrooms, and administrators focus on keeping the system financially afloat. School boards, disconnected from daily realities, move funds while shielding true challenges from public view. Teachers' unions fight for their members in a system where the only bargaining chip is money. Lost in all of this, children and their education. For many students, school feels like a prison. They are forced into an environment where bullying, foul language, and even violence are normalized. Teachers who advocate for their classrooms must navigate a strict chain of command, shaped by decades of union negotiations. Speaking out, outside of sanctioned channels, risks termination, which is what happened to me last spring. I know this firsthand. I was fired from South High for doing all of these things. Despite my connections to the Minneapolis School Board and my status as a union member not fully vetted, both administrators and certain union members that I knew were pressuring me to remain silent. And again, who gets lost in all of this? Children and their education. Weapons are a known reality in schools. Deans, who function as behavioral support, are aware but keep it quiet under the guise of protection. At South, some of the deans and administrators knew of knives, tasers, brass knuckles, so forth, in the building. This knowledge was withheld from teachers and the public. Similarly, fentanyl use was an open secret. When a student journalist exposed fentanyl distribution in school bathrooms, this principal forced the school newspaper to take down the digital article within 24 hours. And sadly, I saw the article and linked it, but then I forgot to take a screenshot. Students confide in trusted teachers, but that's where information often dies. There's no formal, effective reporting mechanism for school culture concerns. Teachers in large districts like MPS lack access to discipline reports and cannot write them for themselves. Instead, their emails vanish into union or administrative limbo. And when teachers try to push back, administrators often use student privacy as a weapon to silence them. If a teacher speaks publicly about safety concerns, even without naming any students, they are accused of violating student privacy laws. This gives schools pretext to fire out outspoken teachers while allowing dangerous behaviors to go unchecked. I experienced this firsthand. Administrators dismissed my concerns as too vague at first to act on, yet specific enough to claim that I had breached confidentiality. Mandated reporting also does not work the way that you think it does. Teachers are required to report signs of abuse, bruises, burns, and cuts, typically from family, but nothing in the system addresses the broader school culture of violence, intimidation, and gaslighting that children endure daily, and the structural hierarchy where teachers are often pitted against administrators who do not want that data to reflect against their school. Administrators also have a chain of command where their concerns often die. As I stated in an opinion piece in the Minnesota Star Tribune last year, Minnesota middle managers have no incentive to report anything, and so the story often disappears. There is no single place for a teacher, student, or parent to document what happens in schools, and those who try to speak out are often swiftly shut down. This leaves virtually everybody vulnerable. The violence in our schools is real, and it is getting worse. Last week at a Fridley versus Robbinsdale Cooper basketball game, young people, likely from another school, stormed past security and attacked a student. Incidents like this rarely make the news because schools don't report them. When the perpetrators are minors, their names are redacted, and any teacher who tries to bring it to light is accused of violating student privacy. This abusive cycle keeps teachers quiet and parents scrambling. Schools should be about education. Yet exhausted teachers logging 50 to 70 hours a week just to keep up are often overwhelmed, and administrators avoid battles with districts and parents. The result: chaos that escalates from elementary to middle to high school, young children exposed to unchecked violence, growing up knowing how to manipulate a broken system. By high school, they've learned that teachers who get too nosy can be removed. Teachers with pensions on the line focus on survival. Meanwhile, students not involved in violence escape into their phones, which we all know, a natural coping mechanism, but one that further stunts education. This is the collateral damage of unsafe schools, and who can blame them? How many of us adults do the exact same thing after a long day at work? And yes, there are guns in schools. Many districts reject metal detectors and school resource officers for their optics. But something has to give. If a gun were in your child's school and the administration knew, wouldn't you want to also? I believe in public education. It is one of the greatest inventions in the United States, but to make it work, we need to break this culture of silence that allows this dysfunction to continue. I lost my job for speaking out. I miss my students and my colleagues, but I would do it again every time if it means that we are one step closer to elevating the voices of the children that are trapped in this system. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we open it up to questions or comments from the committee, anything further, Senator Coleman?
Thank you for your testimony. I'm still kind of processing it all, so I'll save comments at the end.
Sounds good. Members? Senator Wiesenberg.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for taking these arrows. Your job sucks, and we need to protect the kids. Yeah, I'm straightforward. So, you know, before I became a senator, I started a group in my community, and just to try to help, the main thing we were focusing on was education, and that's why I wanted to be on education policies, because we need to fix what's broken, and this is broken. When I first started and became a senator, I sat down with Willie Jett, the commissioner, and, you know, he agreed that our education system needs fixing as well. Now, maybe unbeknownst to some people, but these things are happening. I've had teachers come to me, I've had parents come to me, I've had kids come to me, and I can't, you know, go public with what they're telling me, but we try to fix what's going on without going public, because teachers will lose their jobs. Parents are worried about losing their jobs. Kids are worried about what's going to happen to them. And we hide these things. We got to stop hiding these things. I myself was prosecuted by Department of Education. They threatened a lawsuit on me in October for exposing things. This has to stop. And education is about children. And we're throwing more money at this, and it's not money. We need good people like yourself to not get fired. We need to keep you in school, and we need to listen to you, and we need to do what you're telling us to do. We've had people the last 2 weeks, like yourself, come here and say, our schools are failing, our kids aren't getting educated, and we're sitting here like this. Nope, listen to what we're saying. You're wrong. You are right, and we're not listening to you, and I'm pissed off. So thank you for coming here, and thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other members? Senator Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Coleman, I also like the idea of this bill, but the way it's written, I think, leaves some issues open. For example, on line 1.8, what is violent activity?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Mann. Mr. Cook, is this defined elsewhere in statute, do you know, or is this something we'd have to amend to specifically? So that's something that, as this is laid over, if we want to work together to specifically define that, if it's not elsewhere in statute, I think that would make sense.
Perfect, Mr. Chair. I think that will be necessary because, you know, if I walk over to Senator Miller and slap him in the back of the head, is that violent activity?
Probably needed it.
True.
If I call someone a racial slur, is that violent activity, right? We need to know. And then when we have such vague language, when we leave that discretion to certain people, it just opens up that door for racial bias. And as we know, this is going to cause significant issues. And then the other thing is on line 1.7, each student's parents. Does this mean that if I did slap Senator Miller in the back of the head, every single parent of every single student is going to get a phone call that something happened that day?
Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the way I'm reading that statute is every student whose parents, as it's defined later, who have opted into receiving this type of communication would be notified.
Mr. Chair?
Please.
So again, something that happened between me and somebody else, students, parents who are not in my classroom, not in my grade, weren't there, didn't know what happened, they're all going to get notified within 24 hours.
Senator Coleman.
Thank you. Every student's parent who has signed up to receive the communication would. I personally think that even if it's just between two students, if it's happening in a hallway, if it's happening and disrupting classrooms down the hall, if you heard there was a weapon in your school, which this bill does address, that everyone should know that, but it does protect the student data privacy, or the privacy of the students involved.
Mr. Chair, one last question.
Sure.
So yes, I could potentially, if I opt in, I could be getting like 10 emails every single day under this, which would mean that we would need extra staff to be sending out these emails and these calls, because there would be so many every single day. Is this then an unfunded mandate, since there's no funding for extra staff?
Senator Coleman, to the question of it being an unfunded mandate.
If that's a problem with this committee, I'd love to have that conversation. However, I can tell you sitting here, I've gotten 4 or 5 emails from my kids' school about remember to bring snow boots because there's snow on Friday. We have strep going around. Whose sweatshirt was left behind? And so I don't think this is going to take additional school resource time. And if we are able to send out emails about strep throat and a forgotten sweatshirt and remembering to bring boots, we can send out an email saying there was a gun in our school today.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Mann.
I mean, if we're going to triple, quadruple the amount of emails sent in a day, I think we are going to need that. And I would at some point in time, I know we're going to hear from the schools soon about this for them to answer that question as well.
Any further comment related to that? Nope. To your point, Senator Mann, we will hear from some folks from schools very shortly in the way on this as well. Senator Abler. Somebody make a decision. Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I represent the 3rd largest school district in the state. There's like 2,300 kids that go to the high school I graduated from. We have a large level 3 population. I guess I'm just wondering, like, you know, if I was still in high school and this bill was implemented, if a kid was dysregulated in the level 3 setting and then something happened, but like, I don't even know this kid, I'm not in their class, my parents have no idea what it is. Are we like saying like in, X grade, X student did this thing without identifying information? Or are parents just being like, violence happened today, ask your kid about it, and then my mom's like, hey, what happened today? I'd be like, I don't know. Because there's 2,300 kids that go to my high school. What is the level of detail that's being given potentially to parents?
Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator McQuaid. From my understanding, that's kind of up to the school's discretion so long as student data is not released.
Any follow-up?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll wait to hear from the schools. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that there's a way to tailor this in a way that gets the information you're looking for and the protection, because I understand what you're saying for the protection from retaliation. Absolutely. I'm worried about the word on 1.19 about publicizing, because there is a way to identify information through publicity. And if I was a kid who got harassed at a basketball game, I don't know if I'd want it in the news, right? So there are things there. But I think we need to put a lot more structure around this to get what you're looking at, so that we don't want to make the perception that all of a sudden all these things are happening, because when you're getting an email, the expectation is like this happened to or near your kid, right? Like as it impacted their day. But in a school of 2,300 kids, most of what happens in most of the school, most kids don't see, right? They're in the hallways, they're in the classrooms. I would hear about things like a week later. I'm like, I didn't even hear that. I was right near it. And so we want to make sure that this is like appropriate notification for something that parents can do something with their student and with their kid. And most things that happen at school, most kids don't see. And so I think that the discretion that districts have right now, when they do send out those emails, it is things that most kids will see or most kids will have heard about. And I don't want to go from this to this really fast.
Senator Coleman, any comment?
I'll save them towards the end.
Okay, Senator Abler.
Well, thanks, and actually you helped to enlighten my comments. So let's just step back to the philosophical level, which is where I spend the rest of my time. There's a problem. Schools are getting more and more unsafe. So we talked about that. You're at schools, St. Paul schools. We need police officers in schools to keep kids safe. What has happened to where we are now? And when the whole big thing happened that I was happy to be a part of trying to resolve, people felt safer. And unfortunately, bad things are happening in schools in a whole different way. And the teachers aren't to blame. Most families, the culture has really changed where that's something that is. And if you take away everything, then they'll use a pen as a weapon. I mean, there's no way to take away all the potential harm. And there's this problem. Many people are fleeing the schools, which doesn't help the schools. And so that's a problem. And so do we care about that? These two bills that we have here are trying to care about that. They might need some crafting to make sure we know about what violence is. But I can tell you, when I had my kids at Anoka, I would want to know if somebody brought a gun to school. Mm-hmm. I just want to know that. You know, we can debate where do they come from and all that, but they got one and they brought it. And I would want to know if there's like a gang fight going on. I don't know if I need to know about two kids having an argument, and I think Senator Miller can probably fend for himself okay, but, you know, and that was kind of a joke, but what's the level, how are you going to define violence? I think we need to define that. But I can tell you, if I'm a parent, I want to know today. In this 24 hours, and for the people that are worried about this, that's an accommodation to practicality. But if a child is bullied, and in the opinion of an administrator, it's like, well, it's a little bullying, or I don't want to get in trouble, or is it Miss Thompson? Yeah, that's, that you turn in somebody and you lose your job, who's going to be the next one to turn anybody in? And, you know, there's a lot of ways to be violent to somebody that are really bad. And, you know, part of the SRO thing, they can develop a relationship with somebody who's an authority. They can develop a trusted relationship with a teacher who's not there anymore. And now what's that student going to think that when this teacher got fired, because she decided to point out that something's unsafe in their school? Where have we gone? And you worry about absenteeism, you worry about kids learning. If you're sitting there scared to death, that's a sympathetic fight or flight response. You're not learning. You're sitting there waiting for the bus to come and get you home. I might not come back tomorrow. So what I hear from the committee is there's an interest in this. Let's make it work so that kids can feel safe. And I have one other comment. In a different committee, we spent a lot of time on hospital safety for staff. And the nurses union, who I'm happy to help, has gone to great lengths, even almost striking over the issue of nurse safety in hospitals. They're getting hurt. And so I don't know if they're here today, and it's probably not time, but I would want to hear from Education Minnesota to hear what they think about the safety of their employees in school. Number one, safety. And the second is job protection for somebody who does what they believe to be their moral duty to report. And so I'd be happy for a written one. You can come talk to me, but I think this is something important. This is not a weak union. And I would think that if I was a member of that group, I would feel safe in doing what I thought was the best for the kids. So, and I hope that as the session wears on, this is something that we can find that we agree on. And I think in terms of understanding the big problem, this is actually kind of mid to low level hanging fruit that I think at the end we can be proud of this, that can get the support of the entire legislature and the governor. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything, Senator Miller? Do you want to request a new seat position, or?
I just hope the committee understands if I wear a helmet to the next committee hearing, or perhaps I sit at the end of the table. I just hope there are no questions on why that is happening.
Noted.
That was
Noted.
his comment, okay.
Anything further from any members? Senator Coleman.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Miller's going to want us to define in statute harassment by committee members, but thank you, members, for the time. Thank you again, Chair Swedinsky, for allowing us to do this. As I said at the beginning, school safety, transparency, it's a nonpartisan issue that hopefully we can have bipartisan solutions. So more than happy to work together to fine-tune the language as we move forward. Just speaking as a mother, to the transparency part, whether there's a fight in the school and it happened with 8th graders in their K through 12, or there was a gun in the school but it wasn't their classroom, I want to know. And every parent should have the right to know. We heard today from law enforcement that this issue is probably worse than we realize. And when it takes us hearing from teachers who have nothing left to lose because they have been fired for speaking out, this bill must happen. And so I thank you so much for the time and consideration and hope that this remains a focal point for this committee moving forward.
Thank you. Senate File 676 will be laid over for possible inclusion. As we're swapping out, Senator Koran, if you want to make your way up.
Thank you, Senator Duckworth, for taking over. Senator Koran, I know you are known amongst your colleagues as a man of few words, and so given that we have 20 minutes left in committee time.
Madam Chair, the shot across the bow.
I don't mean to lie on the record
Madam
there,
Chair,
but
I don't think those words have all ever been said in a sentence together before.
Just for a heads up, we have about 20 minutes and a long list of testifiers for your bill. So I appreciate you coming to the committee and for bringing this idea. I believe you have an author's amendment to begin, Senator?
Yes, Madam Chair, I have an A1 author's amendment.
To the amendment.
To Senate File 371.
Oh, Senator Duckworth, will you move the amendment, please?
I move the A1.
Senator Koran to the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will try to be as brief as possible. So the A1 amendment, what it actually did, though, it's kind of the first step. It just adds demonstrable bodily harm has been intentionally inflicted. It's kind of the first step of facing this problem straight on. But 371, Senate File 371 as amended, really kind of falls in the same conversation that it appears today's agenda is. How do we address the issues of violence and transparency? And so this piece of it takes another slice, and is it perfect? No, as I think all of our ideas. It sounds like we have a mini omnibus bill with all of these collective ideas that we should work together to address. But really what 371 does is it addresses the school safety from the following provisions are within it. Schools must begin reporting fights involving pupils if witnessed by an employee to the Department of Education. And ironically, I kind of looked for some updated statistics, and they only have their violence report that's available through 2021. What's happened since 2021? It's not even reported on the Department of Education site. So the commissioner must include this new data on the school fights in the aggregated data reports that are prepared. School employees who witness fighting between students must also report the incident to the school official responsible for discipline. And in the cases where a fight involves demonstrable bodily harm that is intentionally inflicted upon another, it also amends the 371 as amended also requires a police report to be filed. And that's really the change on this one, is what we've seen in the past is kind of an arbitrary decision making by the schools and hoping to lower statistics to kind of mask the actual harm that occurs or the violence that occurs in the schools. We cannot continue to do that. And don't mistake the statements or the reason for this as being that we want to automatically put some juvenile in a detention or in a police-involved environment or some harsh penalty for a first incident. I don't believe that occurs. But these things need to be reported. If they are violence, they are breaking a law. And you cannot unlawfully assault somebody in a school without some consequences. The school should not be the arbiter. And we've seen this in St. Paul Public Schools, Minneapolis Public Schools, and I think the reporting in every bill prior to this bill has kind of covered those pieces where we're just not informing everybody, and we want the schools to be an arbiter. And so, Madam Chair, I'll just live with the one, kind of the mentality that we have is, and we've seen it being pervasive, and one of them that stood out for me is at my alma mater, St. Paul Como Park High School, is a student was a victim of armed burglary in the parking lot, and the parent was extraordinarily frustrated when speaking to the assistant principal that said, all right, did you notify the police? And that person was just adamant, said, sorry, not my responsibility. So you can understand, Senator, Madam Chair, as you listed the frustrations, you want to know these things. But to not call the police on somebody, whether they brandished a weapon or not, that threatened somebody that they did, and then took their personal property in an armed burglary or an armed robbery, those are serious crimes. And they should be addressed. And again, we don't want anybody harmed. We want diversion. I think those things exist, and they're going to continue to exist. But we cannot mask the violence and not share with the public what's actually happening in our schools. So, Madam Chair, if that's as brief as I could get. Now, I believe we have some testifiers, and we'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Senator. I am impressed. And so, members, to the A1 author's amendment, to get it in the shape that the author would like, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the A1 is adopted. Your first testifier, Senator Koran, I believe is Aaron Sandsmark. If you want to make your way to the table, please state your name for the record and begin your testimony.
Hello, hello committee members and chairs. I'm Erin Sandsmark, the Coalition Programs Manager for Solutions Not Suspensions Coalition. To address also Senator Kuczynski, kind of based on earlier, it's in our name, we have solutions for schools. And that's counseling, instituting restorative practices, cultural competency training, and more to make sure our kids feel safe and secure in their schools. We have lots of solutions, but I'm here to testify against Senate File 371. SNS is a coalition of families, students, parents, and organizations who are dedicated to end discriminatory discipline practices in Minnesota schools. I am testifying today in opposition of Senate File 371 because I feel plainly that this bill does nothing more than criminalize our students in instances that should be handled by schools. In Senate File 371 mandates with the amendment that each fight that demonstrates intent would have to have a police report filed. An example that would fall under this law would be a 9-year-old child pushing another child to the ground, causing a scrape or bruising. This bill would force schools to file a police report based on that incident. This is not helpful, and it puts targets on the heads of our kids. This completely strips away the autonomy given to school staff, families, and administrators to follow restorative protocols that benefit student outcomes. By forcing police involvement, this bill would escalate criminalization of youth. Also, this bill does nothing to address the root causes of behavior. Instead of calling the police, let's actually take care of our kids. This bill will not improve school safety, but it will increase fear. Senate File 371 will further criminalize the students who are already most likely to be pushed into the school to prison pipeline. Our Black, Brown, Indigenous, and disabled populations would be most at risk for this push. We need more access to restorative practices, counseling services, and mental health supports. Our goal should be to dismantle the school to prison pipeline and not streamline it with police reports. Please vote no or don't continue this bill to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Up next, we have Kulia Pringle, and on deck is Matt Shaver. I hope you pronounced your name properly. State your name for the record and begin your testimony.
You did a great job, Madam Chair. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, members of the committee. Good afternoon. My name is Kulia Pringle, and I am here today as an advocate for families of students, particularly Black and Brown children who are disproportionately impacted by school discipline policies. I strongly oppose Senate File 371, which would mandate that all fights in schools result in police reports. I do want to make a couple statements based on some stuff that was said earlier about St. Paul Public Schools and how it's run amok. I just visited the ECC Center for 911 because I'm on the Ramsey County Appropriate Response Initiative as a community member, and St. Paul Public Schools has their own direct line to the 911 dispatch. So the idea that no calls are being made by St. Paul Public Schools, to me, sounds preposterous. And then also, I'm not in the habit of speaking on behalf of principals, but for some reason, I don't feel like principals are out there allowing things in their schools to happen with drugs and violence and nobody's reporting it. I just don't see that happening. And I work with families and students and principals on a daily basis trying to reform schools using parent voice. And I just don't see that principals are just allowing their schools to run amok. This bill is not about student safety. It is about criminalization. We know that Black students, students with disabilities, and marginalized youth are already over-policed in schools instead of supporting children in need. Senate File 371 reinforces a system that throws them away, but these children don't disappear. They grow up, and the way we treat them now determines the kind of adults they will become and the kind of society we will have. Senate File 371 is too broad and strips educators and administrators of discretion, forcing them to involve law enforcement in situations that could be handled through restorative justice practices, conflict resolution, and other interventions that actually address the root causes of fights. Schools should be places of growth, not gateways to criminal justice system. If a situation truly requires police involvement, school officials already have the authority to make that call. So why might mandate a response that isn't necessary in every case? Why create smoke where there's no fire? We already weakened a good bill that would have protected children from dangerous holds, and now there's an effort to gut even more policies that protect them. I urge this committee to invest in solutions that support students, such as restorative practices, mental health resources, and culturally responsive conflict resolution. The model policy that you all spoke of earlier, that somebody talked about training, we did not, I also sat on that committee, and we were not able to address training. We asked for training that school resource officers would be given, and we never got to see those trainings. So that model policy that you all legislated said the things that we would create, none of those things were creative. That model policy was performative. Our children deserve learning environments where they feel safe, supported, and valued, not policies that push them towards a future of criminalization. I urge you to vote no on Senate File 371, and let's focus on literacy. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We have Matt Shaver up next, followed by Mr. Driver and Aronson on deck. So welcome. Please state your name for the record.
Chair Coleman, Chair Swedzinski, members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is Matt Shaver. I'm a teacher and the Senior Policy Director at Ed Allies. We are advocates who partner with students, families, and educators to use policy to build schools that kids deserve. I'm here today to testify in opposition to Senate File 371 as amended. As others have mentioned, this bill will require a police report to be filed for fights that occur even for 5-year-olds. We do appreciate the amendment provides some definition around demonstrable bodily harm triggering a police report rather than any physical altercation. However, the overall impact of this legislation would result in a serious overcorrection to how schools respond to students when they make harmful choices. And I'll say here what I told my 4th graders, my 5th graders, my 6th graders, my 8th graders. Fighting is wrong. There is no good reason for a student to put their hands on another student, period. Every child deserves to feel safe at school. No child deserves to be hurt at their school. It may not feel this way in the moment, but there are always other choices available to students than fighting. And it's okay for there to be meaningful consequences when students do make a negative choice and hurt someone in their school community. And there was no worse feeling I experienced as a teacher than when I saw a student I loved, a student who I put months of energy and care into building a relationship with, make the choice to hurt somebody else. The amount of work I put in and other teachers put in to foster student relationships of trust and respect can blow up in a second when a fight happens. It crushed me to see my kids know what the right thing to do was and choose to do the wrong thing instead. And in 10 years of teaching, I broke up a lot of fights with little kids, big kids, in the hallway, in the bathroom, the playground, the classroom, in the lunchroom. And at no time did it ever cross my mind that filing a police report on my kids involved would improve the situation, help to rebuild the relationships, or pick up the pieces of our classroom culture that got wrecked when kids chose to go down that path. And just from a practical standpoint moving forward, how excited would that kid be to learn about the water cycle from Mr. Shaver, the guy who filed a police report on him? This kind of sledgehammer response breaks those relationships. What did go through my mind was trying to understand all the things that had to go wrong in the seconds, minutes, hours, and days that led to a student feeling like the only viable option in front of them was to try and hurt their classmate. Solving for that, giving kids tools, outlets, and other options that feel more viable than using their fists, that's our collective responsibility. That's how we prevent fights and increase safety at school. Heard a lot about transparency and communication today, the need for parents to know what's going on in schools when it comes to safety and incidents of violence. Definitely area of agreement there. Next time you have a moment, I'd ask you to take a look at our statewide report card. Click on that tab, our Students Safe and Engaged. You'll see we have more and better reporting on incidents of violence in Minnesota schools by type, age, and grade level than we do on another topic of this committee's interest, chronic absenteeism. Our report card can tell you how many 5 to 10-year-olds were accused of physically assaulting district staff, but not how many 5 to 10-year-olds were chronically absent from school. As Senator Koran noted, that data is from a few years ago, and that's true for attendance as well. We should be asking MDE the reason why that is. We ask tens of thousands of kids in Minnesota every couple years if they feel safe in school, and we track their responses over time. If you've ever been around kids, they're pretty honest about how they feel about school. And if you look at the data, kids are pretty consistent too. Across the last 4 Minnesota student surveys going back to 2013, 91% of surveyed students in Minnesota say they feel safe at school. And let's be clear, a kid being punched by a peer is not feeling safe at school in that moment. And none of us should be satisfied until all students feel safe at school. But the narrative that our schools in general have become so chaotic and dangerous isn't backed by what kids are saying collectively. That doesn't mean there aren't serious safety challenges either. But we don't have to be fatalistic. Kids aren't lost causes, and we're not going to fix real issues by systematically and unrelentingly criminalizing first graders. Kids deserve to go to schools where they can make mistakes, even big ones, and have the opportunity to learn and grow from those mistakes, not have those mistakes haunt them for the rest of their lives. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. Thank you all for your public service to the state.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Up next, we have Mr. Driver and Mr. Aronson to round out our testifiers, and I believe you're testifying on every bill today, so I appreciate you just wanting to do it all at the end. Thank you.
Madam Chair and members, I'm Roger Aronson. I represent the Minnesota Association of Secondary School Principals, and we also have the Executive Director of the Minnesota Associations of Secondary School Principals here as well. As I mentioned earlier, the administrative groups get together, and so this testimony is also offered on behalf of the Minnesota School Board Association, Association of School Administrators, as well as the Association of Metropolitan School Districts. A couple of comments on the technical pieces of the bills, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Driver to talk just generally as his experience and some of the things that he can add to the committee. And just we want to talk about some of the technical aspects of the bills, and I think some of the questions that members have raised actually were things that we were going to raise here with you as well. Mr. Driver will talk a little bit about the reporting within 24 hours. Sometimes we need some flexibility on that for a host of reasons in 557, and I know that you had some conversation about that already. One of the things I think that's important, though, to point out, and that's the notification of parents section in the Pupil Fair Dismissal Act. Anytime that we suspend a child, which this covers a lot of that type of activity, state law already requires that we send a notice to parents. So the thought that we're not notifying parents when these incidents occur, that actually happens. The suspension notice has to be provided to the parents, and it goes home with the child, and so we have that particular requirement. You hit on 676 what jumped out in that provision. The first line talks about, transparency and reporting, and that we would report violent activity. We have another statute, and we might like to look at that at some point, 121A64. That statute talks about notifying teachers of kids who have a history of violent behavior before we put them into that classroom. You asked if violent activity is defined. That statute doesn't define history of violent behavior. This doesn't either. You heard last week from the superintendent of our largest school district that we had 350 evacuations of classrooms in the Anoka-Hennepin School District last year. Talk about an incident where a special ed kid injures a teacher, okay? And that's, I think, what you weren't really looking at this. I think this was trying to get to a fight that happened in a hallway or a cafeteria or something like that. But this actually would collect those incidents where a teacher was injured as the result of a student interaction. And then we would have to then, if you follow that, report that to everybody that signed up to get that report. And I think you kind of talked about, is that what you really want to do? And how many reports are we going to be making on that? And what interest do you want to serve in that? So we bring that up to discuss some of those pieces with you. I might say that the third statute or proposal here, the third bill, a couple of things about to think about on this. We do have to report all of the disciplinary incidents in school to the department, and we have to categorize them. And one of the categories is fighting. I was pulling up that report, and I think Senator mentioned 2021. 21-22 report is on. I don't think that's a lot better. I think it ought to be early, we ought to have that more. But in 21-22, I think the data that I wrote down said that we had a report statewide of 11,536 fights. I mean, we're making these reports. They're happening there. People can go down by the school district and find those. They can find them by grades. They can find them by race. They can find them by disability. There's an awful lot of data out there already on this. And so I just want to raise that of you say we want to report a specific category, and you're adding this in the reporting statute. I mean, that's what at line 1.18, the board must include student identification numbers on affected pupils of all dismissals. That's state law right now. Dismissal includes every suspension. Expulsion excludes and suspension are dismissals. So we report all of that now. This tends to identify now a little more special breakout category that I think may be included in the statute already. It is interesting here that it says that we have to have the employees file the police report. So this would be teachers filing the police reports. Question they have is, does everybody have to file a police report? Is one police report sufficient to cover everyone else? This kind of tracks what we do with maltreatment. A lot of issues raised on this for the functional pieces of this. I just wanted to raise those, and we're going quickly because I know we don't have a lot of time, but we will obviously be available to work with staff and senators on these kinds of issues as you go forward. I think, frankly, I have represented the secondary school principals, I hate to say, for almost 40 years now. And some of the things that you heard about people not wanting to report information or keep things secret or that sort of stuff is certainly outside of my experience on that. I haven't heard that ever, and frankly, that would not be good practice, I think, if you were talking to principals. I'll turn it over to Mr. Driver here, and I think he can give you some nice background for you.
Thank you, Mr. Aronson. Very briefly, you mentioned another area of statute that did not have violent history defined that you were curious about. Could you rattle off that number again, please?
Yeah, it's 121A64.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Driver, please state your name for the record and begin your testimony.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Bob Driver. I am the Executive Director for the Minnesota Association of Secondary School Principals. Our organization has 1,350 current practicing secondary principals around the state of Minnesota. We basically represent all the districts, public districts around the state of Minnesota. I am the proud past principal of St. Michael Albertville High School, and I was there in that district for 13 years, and I was an administrator in both St. Michael and at Buffalo for 16 years. So that's kind of a little background about who I am as far as an administrator. I first want to say thank you, thank the committee for allowing me to testify today. I'm here to discuss a few concerns, and the first one is in the Senate file 557. Related to education requiring parental notification of adverse incidents. At the core, the safety of students is always our top priority. We know that a safe environment is essential for students to feel secure, supported, and ready to focus on their learning. When students feel safe, they are able to engage more fully in the educational process, which is why the safety of our school community is a foundational piece to every decision that we make. In addition, to safety, we also strongly believe in the importance of communication with parents and guardians. Open, transparent communication creates a strong partnership between the school and the families, which in turn strengthens the overall educational experience for all the students in Minnesota. Our primary concern lies in the language of the bill, specifically the 24-hour notification requirement once a report of incident is received. We understand the legislative intent here and understand why it is here. We want to make sure that we ensure that parents are kept informed in a timely manner. Communication with both parents of the target student and the parent of the student responsible for the conduct is certainly important, and we always aim to do that as quickly as possible. However, while we are committed to timely communication, the 24-hour window is challenging, partly in certain types of incidents. For most situations, this may not be an issue, as our principals and our school staff are highly trained to swiftly act and respond promptly. In fact, many incidents are resolved within that time frame or much earlier, usually by day end. But there are situations that require more time to ensure that the investigation is thorough and accurate. When there are multiple aggressors and multiple targets involved, or when the situation is unclear and complex, the investigation process can take longer. We also know that social media can complicate these cases. Sometimes the identity of the aggressor is not immediately clear, especially when an online behavior is involved. In these instances, the time required to gather and verify information can extend beyond the 24-hour window, potentially making it impossible to meet the deadline without sacrificing accuracy. We also need to consider the time required for due process. Ensuring that all students involved in an incident are treated fairly and respectfully is fundamental to maintaining the integrity of the school environment. This means taking the time to thoroughly investigate and gather all facts before any decisions are made. There are instances where one or more students involved in an incident may be absent the next day, which can further delay the investigation. When students are absent, we need additional time to interview them and complete the fact-finding process. Given these complexities, we respectfully request that the 24-hour notification language be reconsidered. We ask that principals be given the flexibility to continue their fact-finding and investigations without the pressure of 24-hour deadline. Most situations can be addressed quickly, but for the more complicated, nuanced incidents, having additional time to gather accurate information ensures that the decisions are well-informed and just, especially important when dealing with the incidents that have potential to impact students' well-being and their reputations. We hope that this perspective is considered as this bill moves forward.
Members, questions? Senator Duckworth.
Senator Cran, it's sort of a question about your bill, but I'm just going to make a comment. If it's accurate, you can just nod. So I appreciate your amendment because I think what it does is a great example of probably what's occurring for the hearing today. Which is this. We know that most districts out there, most students, most parents, most teachers are doing a phenomenal job. And sometimes when we talk about these issues and we bring awareness to incidences that sound pretty horrific or tragic, folks feel like we're painting a broad brush about all teachers and schools and districts across the state, which is not the case. We recognize this is a vast minority of instances, and for the most part, our schools are doing great. So I appreciate you gentlemen being here and adding that testimony as well. The modification to your bill was, we're not saying that we want to file a police report in every instance. We're not saying we don't want one filed ever. We're saying only when it makes sense. When someone is hurt, when there's bodily harm, and there is an intent to hurt that person. And I think our entire conversation today, Madam Chair, and why both Republicans and Democrats can work together on this is we all agree on the same thing. We want safe schools, we want to protect teachers, and we want our kids to learn. And one thing that we do have to acknowledge without getting too defensive or thinking we're being too critical is that instances of classroom disruption and incidences of violence have increased over the last few years on average in Minnesota public schools. And we would be failing one another and the people of Minnesota if we didn't have a conversation about that and see how we can fix it. So I appreciate everybody coming here today to collaborate, work together on that, acknowledge that there are some things we can do to improve this. Senator Cran, I appreciate you trying to get at it with this bill. And I just hope, Madam Chair, we all remember that at the end of the day, it's about one thing only, keeping our kids and schools safe. We've got several ways that we can do that, and it's not necessarily a bad thing to talk about. We should be rushing to that problem in order to address and fix it.
Members, we are getting kind of a list and getting towards the end, so I'll quickly call on Senators Abler, followed by Makewaid and Swedzinski.
I get it, we're short. I appreciate the discussion. I hope that the sense of the committee is things aren't as good as we wish. I think we might agree on that. If you don't agree on that, then I guess we should talk about that. But a lot of my parents wish they know. I think a lot of other parents wish they know, and things are not as good as they were, and there's all kinds of challenges. I think we also agree that nobody wants a child with disability be singled out in some way, in a way that's bad for, you know, the prison to pipeline. But I want to point out those also students with disabilities are at risk themselves. And to ignore this, just the way it goes with some of those young people is a problem. I think teachers should feel safe. I think people should be free to talk. I think there's some work to be done. And I think there's a consensus point, maybe not the whole breadth of these bills, but I think by the time the session's over, we could agree on something that would move the ball forward. And I'm happy to be a part of that, so thank you.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Koran, I know you had an amendment to the bill, but I want to point out that even though you added after 2.9, if appropriate, right? Is that what I'm seeing? That they verify that the police report, if appropriate, was filed, but on 2.8, we're saying they must file a police report?
Madam Chair. Senator McQuaid, of the original bill, is that what you're speaking of?
With your amendment.
Yeah.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Could you restate your question?
So with your amendment, what I'm reading is that there must be a police report filed, and then the school board will verify, if appropriate, that the police report was filed. Am I reading the amendment to the bill correctly?
Senator Koran.
Yeah, want to report. We've got plenty of work to do, Senator, on, because I think the two testifiers just brought up, you know, or the one previous, who actually makes the report. I think we got plenty of work we could do to refine that. I think all of it is, it's those that are falling through the cracks, either willfully or by accident, where violent crimes are just not being reported. And so my entire intent is, when it's a violent crime, it doesn't have anything to do with anything else except for that some child was a victim of violent crime. We're not even addressing the threats and the violence against teachers in this, but the real intent is that those violent crimes need to be reported. It's a crime. And for the schools to arbitrarily just decide, we'll be the arbiter of what is a crime and what isn't a crime and should be reported. At a minimum, they should report them. And I think they're available to 2022 of what I just learned through MDE. But there's big gaps in that reporting. And so in this case, to continually allow the most violent to occur, and that's kind of what we're getting at, right? The most disruptive, most violent, without consequence, all we're going to have is continued more violence. And so we've got to find a pathway in between. I think we got plenty, everybody just described a host of wraparound services that are available, and yet we have more and more violence in the schools. And the teachers, I have one teacher buddy that's in Minneapolis Public Schools. He has a threat against him, said, well, you should be shot. And the administration says, it's part of the job. That child's on an IEP and there's nothing they're going to do about it. So if that child took a violent act, right, that's actually a real threat. That's violating a current state statute, or many of them. Those are not being addressed. So is the solution perfect? I think, as we heard all the bills today, none of them are perfect, but it's identifying all of these areas in which we appear to be saying we don't want injustice involved, we want redirection, right, intervention, all those things. We have them. We're swimming in social services everywhere. And yet we still have these things occur. And so I'm going to open on any way we can refine it and make sure that these things are reported at a minimum, Department of Education, and then where appropriate, that a police report is actually filed. It's an obligation they have when a crime is committed, especially a violent crime.
Madam Chair, so Senator Koran, I think the important piece is that when a person has a violent crime perpetrated against them, they get to choose to file a police report or not. And the thing that I see here is that you want the school district to step in and decide what a parent and a kid should decide to do. And they have to decide if it was a violent crime or not, but you actually haven't said violent crime here. You've just said demonstrable bodily harm, and it was intentionally inflicted. And we heard the we heard the description of a kid pushing a kid down on the playground and they get a scrape, right? That's intentional bodily harm and harm was inflicted. Bringing the police into a situation with no consent from the parent or the student is not going to change the behaviors that you're talking about. There are so many other solutions to changing behaviors. The whole set of bills today was under the guise of if we tell the police more things and we tell parents more things, behavior is going to change. We have more ways to communicate today than we've ever had before. That's probably part of the problem, right? Cell phones, social media, all of the ways that we are getting in the way of actually communicating with each other as humans. But this is like a solution in search of a problem. And I just couldn't see myself supporting any version of this that is forcing a district to step in to inject kids into the criminal legal system. What if a kid got beat up because he was undocumented? And now we've reported him to the police. I mean, I just cannot see how a kid would feel safe going to school after that, where their teachers and their educators and their administrators are the people who are reporting them to law enforcement on a regular basis, instead of giving them the opportunity to learn different tools, repair relationships with one another. I knew kids who would fight one day and the next day they'd be hugging each other down the hallway. That's not how school works. School is where kids learn to grow up, not suffer adult consequences for having non-formed frontal lobes. And so I just, this entire notion that if we reported more kids to the police, their behaviors would change, if that was true, then the war on drugs would have survived, right? We would have won, and we didn't. So we need to get out of this idea that reporting things to the cops is how we solve problems, because it's not. That's not working, and we need to do other things. So these aren't solutions. And it's really hard to sit here and listen to us talk about kids in that way and then say like, well, let's just report them to the police and they'll shape up. That's not gonna work.
Madam Chair?
Senator Coran,
Yep, got it.
brief rebuttal.
Senator McQuaid, everything you described in what you would prefer in the ideal world already exists, and the crimes are getting more violent and without consequences. Again, we don't want anybody in the criminal justice system, but our current system is failing, and we've got more of them going into criminal justice. From violent crimes without consequences and redirection, which doesn't appear to be happening. Talk to the teachers that are in the schools. They don't feel safe, right? They're not taken, and the victims, you just described, most of the crimes are perpetrated by somebody that looks just like them. And so we can throw all those things out because that's the reality. They're getting more violent, and we're seeing schools overtly work at not reporting these things, and they want to be the arbiter of what is a crime. And those things should be reported. So, Madam Chair, I hope we have opportunity to continue to work on all the ideas here. We have to do something. Our students and our teachers deserve it, and our kids need to be in a position where they can receive an education. Thank you.
Senator Swedzinski.
Thank you, everybody, today. And it just seems like this is screaming bipartisan, that we should be able to figure this out. We all want kids and teachers to feel safe, and educators and lunch line ladies and school or bus drivers, and we just got to keep working at it, and it just seems like we're going to get it right eventually. But like 5 years ago, one of the alternative learning centers in the metro, in the West Metro, called me in. They wanted to meet with me. They had $2 million in workman's comp claims of kids beating up staff, and that was like $2 million in work. And so we got to get this right. I mean, it's just costing us money. It's costing us energy. Kids are suffering. Staff is kid. I don't want that. Somebody brought up the example of they couldn't wait for their kid to get on the bus today to go home where it was safe, and that's crazy. And if we can't get this right, who can? I mean, we're all intelligent, wise people that have election certificates, and I get the balance between public safety and individual students' privacy. That balance is a struggle, and I get the struggle between local control and legislative mandates, and I ask my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. I just want to remind you all that every one of these bills has the word "must" in it. So give us a little grace over the word "must" that was found in so many bills the last couple years next time. And, so I hope we can just work together, and I appreciate everybody coming in and testifying, and don't give up on us, because I think eventually we will get this right. And so thank you all for everything you had to offer today.
Thank you. Senate File 371 is laid over for possible inclusion. Senator Swedzinski, I would like to thank you again so much for allowing me one more opportunity to talk about an issue that my colleagues and I are passionate about. I really liked the idea Senator Koran brought up of having a mini omnibus about this issue. And in the spirit of wanting to be bipartisan, there's so many times that I see, oh, I love most of this bill, and then there's these couple pieces I just can't vote for. And so I'd love to see more chairs in the House and the Senate do more mini omnibus, more issue area focused. And I think if we truly want to have bipartisan work moving forward for both of us, it's going to take coalition building of members and courageousness. And so I thank you so much for the opportunity. Would you like to make any announcements for next week?
Are you done?
I am.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Coleman. It's been a pleasure. I prefer the word responsibility sharing rather than power sharing. I think it has a nicer ring to it. Somebody else brought that to my attention, not me. I can't take credit for it. I hope we continue. I'll be taking the gavel from here on out, but I just want to let Senator Coleman and people in the audience know we're hearing a GOP bill and a DFL bill on Monday. One's an Abler bill, and the other bill is Senator Mann's research she did on cell phones over the course of the summer and the fall. So anyways, with that said, continue our hard work, hopefully in bipartisan nature. So thank you.
I look forward to it. The committee meeting is now adjourned.